Britain's Holly Budge started off her sporting life while she was still a toddler, when she began riding and eventually taking up eventing. But by the age of 20, she had discovered skydiving, and shortly after moved to New Zealand, where she learned to film while skydiving and became the third woman in the country's history at that time to be a skydiving camerawoman. In 2008, she took up her next challenge and became the first woman to skydive off Mount Everest. And the following year, she took part in the famous Mongol Derby, covering 1,000 kilometres in just 9 days. Since then, she's taken on some of the world's highest peaks, summiting Everest, Cho-Oy and Burunsi, and then snowboarding from the 6,500-metre summit of Mera Peak. Last year, she made a successful first ascent and summit of Mount Zuki in the Mongolian Altai Mountains, and then led a successful expedition on the technical Ama Dablam in Nepal. Holly supports a diverse range of charities and has raised over £300,000 through her adventures. She's passionate about sustainability, design and conservation, and has a master's in sustainable energy. She's currently combining a campaign with an exhibition entitled How Many Elephants?, which presents a physical commentary on the devastating impact of the elephant ivory trade. 96 elephants are poached every day, which at that rate would make them extinct by 2025. And Holly joins me now from her home in Hampshire, England, where she's getting ready to open that exhibition this weekend. Hi Holly, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too, Chris.
And how are things in sunny Hampshire?
I'm not sure about sunny, but things are good. I'm always excited to get into a new year and get on with doing another year of exciting adventures and worthwhile projects.
Now, I see that you list yourself as an adventurer, a conservationist, and a motivational speaker. Is that your order of preference on how you like to be known?
I've never been asked that, so that's a good question. I think I'm equally as passionate about adventuring and the conservation side of things. And then when I'm home, I love sharing those stories, and that's my bread and butter too. So I think they're all of equal measure, those three.
Now, before we get into what you're doing now, Holly, let's rewind a little bit, because I believe you started off as a rider, and we share that common interest, of course, in eventing. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was born in the saddle, it's safe to say. I think I was sitting on a horse, from a very, very young age. And then I remember competing probably when I was about 6 or 7 years old. That's when I started eventing. So dressage, cross country and show jumping. And then I went on to represent my country in the Amateurs Nation Cup in Ireland. That was when I was about 18 or 19. And I absolutely loved it. And I've always said to people, the adrenaline rush I get from galloping around big cross-country courses, I just can't parallel that with anything else that I've done. So jumping out of aeroplanes, which, I was doing every day for a time in my life, didn't come anywhere close to the adrenaline and the fear that I got riding around big tracks, on a horse. But I don't ride at the moment. I'm without a horse, so I'm having a break in my riding.
So what was the turning point then, Holly? What made you stop eventing and turn to other adventures?
So the turning point for me was when I went backpacking when I was 21. I went around Australia and New Zealand, as a lot of people do. And I went and did a tandem skydive, and that completely changed the course of my life at that time. I was completely blown away that people were getting paid to jump out of aeroplanes. And my careers advisor at school hadn't mentioned that as a possible career option. So I, right there and then, decided that I wanted to become a skydiving camerawoman. And I like to call it the arrogance of youth. And I mean arrogance in a positive sense, that I didn't see any problems with moving halfway around the world to New Zealand to get a job skydiving, which I knew nothing about, and get a job as a camerawoman, and I knew nothing about filming, but none of that mattered. So I did get my job. I was the third woman ever to have worked in New Zealand as a camerawoman at that time. So yeah, it just sort of happened. I didn't plan for that. That was just one of life's, twists of fate. And that led me, on to the other side of the world, doing something completely different than riding horses.
So presumably you always had a head for heights then. That wasn't an issue here. What did you find you most got out of it, Holly?
So that lasted on and off for about 5 years. And I absolutely loved it. It was a dream job at that time in my life. 2 jumps, the cost, what I got paid for 2 jumps covered my rent for the whole month. And I was doing anywhere up to 14 jumps a day. So I felt very rich at that time in my life. And New Zealand was quite cheap then. So it was an amazing job for that time. And it taught me it taught me a huge amount, and a huge amount about managing fear and being able to overcome fears. So by the time I was a fully fledged camera woman, I could be going up in the plane 12 to 14 times a day, and my heart rate wouldn't have changed from me sitting here talking to you. So I was able to really manage through breathing and through trusting myself, backing myself to make good decisions. I guess it gave me a lot of belief in myself and my ability of what I could and couldn't do. And also when you're skydiving, there's no one there to ask questions. When you're in free fall under parachute, it's just you on your own, or it was for me anyway. Obviously if you're doing a tandem, you can chat away, but when you're working as a solo jumper, you have to back yourself to make the right decisions and quickly, because there is no one else to ask. So I think that really, brought on that skill as well.
If you didn't have a fear of heights then, that there was a fear, what was that fear that you were managing?
I think it's very unnatural to be plummeting to anywhere around the 120 mile an hour sort of limit. So I don't think there's anything natural about that. Everything in your body is screaming, no, this isn't right, especially when you're a beginner and you're learning. But then, is there anything natural about, as we said earlier, galloping towards a jump on a horse flat out? None of these things are natural or don't come naturally to us. So I think there's always a fear that maybe that fear is that you're going to hurt yourself, or worse still, you don't want to kill yourself. So for me, yes, I mean, plummeting to the ground, I guess there's a fear your parachute's not going to open, or, whereabouts are you in relation to your landing area? We've had some really hairy jumps where, you've gotten out the plane in the wrong spot, and then you find yourself over a big lake, or, in the wrong position to get back to the landing area to make a safe landing. So I think all of these are very real fears. A lot of fear is perceived, but a lot of it is real. And in skydiving, a lot of my fear, I guess, was real fear.
It sounds like it, for someone here that doesn't have a head for heights, it's managing that as well. And I know people who have a fear of heights actually do jump out of planes, and it's something that maybe changes their life. I mean, during the course of your life, I know when I was much younger, I didn't have a fear. I loved flying, and I wanted to jump out of a plane. They wouldn't let me because of an injury, but I wanted to do all of that, and it changes in the course of your life. So managing fear, I think that's a big lesson, as you say. You managed to control that and still enjoy what you were doing. And of course, no more beautiful place in the world than New Zealand to be flying over it.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely part of the world. So that was a piece of your life then, that you obviously got a taste for the mountains and then took it seriously, decided not to jump out of planes for a while, but actually to climb those mountains.
Yeah, well, that actually leads on nicely there, because the mountain and the skydiving connection came when I heard about the opportunity to skydive Mount Everest. So as a skydiver, I knew that was an opportunity I didn't want to miss, to skydive next to the world's highest mountain. So I rang the company that were organising that expedition, and it very quickly became apparent that there were no women signed up for that. So there was my hook right there, that I knew I could get sponsors on board, because it was quite an expensive, very expensive exercise or an expedition. So I knew that I could get sponsored to become the first woman to skydive Everest, and that's what I did. And that set a world first record. And that's when I first laid eyes on Everest. So I don't want to jump ahead of your questions.
Well, no, you're going in the right direction here, because I was going to ask you what was it about skydiving Everest that made you think, okay, then the natural thing to do is actually climb it?
Yes. Going back to when I call it the arrogance of youth, it's a similar thing. When I first saw Everest, I just knew one day I would be back to climb that mountain, and with all the good intentions of standing on the summit. But I knew nothing about mountaineering at that stage, but that didn't matter. And I think there's something very important about that I try and say yes and commit to as much as I can, and not worry about the sort of smaller details until you need to. I think committing and is a very important thing, and you can learn new skills, and that's exactly what I did. I 6 years ago sort of started learning about mountaineering, and now I've got a whole handful of big Himalayan mountains under my belt, which were in preparation for climbing Everest. I'm not saying Everest is the pinnacle. I get asked that a lot, and it's not by any means for me. People say, what will you do now that you've summited Everest? Well, I'll carry on doing other mountains. 2/3 of the world's mountains are unclimbed, and I think there's something, rather than going to mountains that are crowded and full of people, I'd much rather start climbing mountains that haven't been climbed before and that aren't too crowded. But yes, so I knew 6 years ago that I wanted to get on this journey of climbing mountains, and I knew that I had to get sponsored to do a lot of this. So you've always got to have that angle and that hook to get the sponsors, and it gets harder and harder, especially with mountains like Everest, where lots of people have climbed them. You have to, be quite imaginative with what you're proposing to your future sponsor, because obviously climbing Everest and holding a flag on the summit is, it's been done many times now. So I came up with an idea of approaching a telecommunications company that are trying to promote Wi-Fi in remote places. So that was my angle on Everest, and I took their modem to the summit of Everest and posted a photo to social media, which I believe hadn't been done before. So that was my angle there.
That was quite catchy. Yeah. Wi-Fi reaches everywhere. Good idea, Holly. And of course, we've heard Everest stories from Cathy O'Dowd, who you will know, she was the first woman to ascend Everest on both faces, and she's now the host of a brand new podcast, The Business of Adventure, called New Horizons, the show. But she started this Business of Adventure. You talked about raising sponsorship and being original. Well, Cathy is going to cover all aspects of the fundraising that you need to do with a big adventure like that. And have you then had all of your big adventures sponsored then, Holly? I mean, is that
yes,
how
I
you
have.
got about it? Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do them if I hadn't. So yeah, everything I've done. And it does get easier the more as my portfolio grows, I suppose it's definitely easier approaching the sponsors with some big expeditions under your belt, when you're a more proven entity. But it's by no means easy. Like it might get easier, but I'd never say it was easy.
You certainly have added to your credibility, of course, with this. And there are so many more mountains to climb, as we hear.
Yes.
Everest is only one, and lots of adventures to come. I want to talk about what you have planned for the future before we then talk about your conservation interests, Holly. But
yes.
What's on your to-do list now?
That's a great question. So I'm excited for 2018. There's lots going on. And again, actually, this leads quite nicely into the conservation, because now I'm very consciously taking my adventures in a new direction, where rather than it just being about the adventure itself, I want my adventures to be something greater than the adventure itself. So what I mean by that is I want to combine my conservation interests with my adventures. So my plan for this year, because I run an anti-poaching campaign for raising awareness of the African elephant crisis. I'm very passionate about that, and in the coming back from New Zealand and where I am now, I probably should mention I did a master's degree in sustainable design, and during that 2 years, which was absolutely amazing, fantastic 2 years, I got on a real journey. I was so passionate about what I was doing with the elephants, and I've written a book, and I've got a travelling exhibition which I'm right in the middle of setting up this week, and that's hopefully going to be travelled. I'm going to take that to China and South Africa and London in 2018. So my adventure, to add on to my campaign, I want to hike the Great Wall of China from one end to the other. But as well as it being about adventure, it's about research. I want to, very humbly research how elephant ivory fits into the Chinese culture, and how it's so deeply ingrained in their traditions and their beliefs and, in a culinary and medicinal sense. So I want to really explore that and go into rural China and go into very remote communities and, just see what's going on there, really. So, yes, tying that all together would be hiking the Great Wall. And then I want to showcase my exhibition in Beijing, Shanghai and Hong Kong. So the adventure will be raising, I'll hopefully get some media attention for doing the Great Wall, which will then, be good for the exhibition and raising awareness of that. I'm also trying to train with an all-female anti-poaching team in Africa. They're the first and only all-female. I say only, that's not true. They were the first and only. There's another one now as well. Amazing women, absolutely incredible role models. So I want to go and train and immerse myself with these ladies for about 6 weeks and make a documentary about that. So that's on the cards. And I've got a TV company that right behind me with doing that. So that's very exciting. And then I'm running 3 expeditions in the Himalayas in September, October, November, one of which is going to be an all-women's hike. And then I'm taking people to a very remote village of, so I've worked very closely because I've worked as an expedition leader in the Himalayas. I work very closely with the Sherpas. So one of the Sherpas we're going back to his village and we're taking a group of people with us. And I was there recceing that 2 months ago, and some of the people in the village had never seen white skin before, so incredibly remote. So that's very worthwhile. We're going to take supplies to the local schools and do some some things like that. And then I'm taking trekkers up to Camp 1 on Ama Dablam, which is a 6,800 meter peak. It's sort of next to Everest. It's much more technical than Everest. I led an expedition there at the end of 2016, and it's a crazy mountain, really. It's rock climbing up to 6,000 meters, and then a very steep ascent up to the summit from that point on. So I'm exploring this new space of taking. It's kind of like extreme trekking, taking people off the beaten path and onto the mountain, but you don't have to have experience of snow or ice. You don't have the risk of avalanches. But you can still experience acclimatizing with climbers and actually be on, a beautiful, huge Himalayan mountain. So there's lots going on.
You mentioned you're going to be going back to that Everest region again. I read somewhere recently that they've changed the rules there, haven't they, to give access or limit access to Everest. Just explain that to our listeners, if you would, Holly. Yeah,
so that's basically the Nepalese government don't want any solo climbers on Everest. So I climbed Everest from the Tibet side, so from the north, and they haven't enforced that on the north side, but certainly in Nepal, if you're a solo climber, you will need to be accompanied by a Himalayan guide. So I imagine there's some people up in arms about that. To be honest, I don't know a lot about Everest from the south side. One of the reasons I chose to climb it from the north is because it's much less crowded. It's much colder, it's very exposed on the north, but I wanted to avoid the crowds as much as possible. So, Everest, my knowledge of Everest is not the Nepalese side of it.
Oh, I'm with you on avoiding the tourists in these places.
Yeah, very much so. I could do a whole separate podcast just on that alone.
That alone. And just going back to the Great Wall of China, will you do that alone or will you have company?
I will probably have company. Yeah. As much as I think solo expeditions are amazing, and I take my hat off to a lot of people that do them. I think also there's places that you don't need to go as a Western female alone. And I believe, could be wrong, but my gut tells me that, I don't need to hike the Great Wall and go into very rural, remote communities alone. I just don't see the point in that. So I probably won't be doing that on my own.
And when you look at all of these that you've just explained to us, they would all be funded then? You don't have a job outside of this, outside of raising funds to do these adventures?
I have a very mundane job. I help out with a property management company. So when I'm home, I do work, and that pays the bills to a certain degree. There's nothing, I've no passion in that job whatsoever, but it's when I'm home, I do help out with that a little bit because that's a family business. But most of my bread and butter is speaking. I do a lot of speaking. I'm sort of speaking 3 or 4 times a week at the moment. So the main bread and butter is corporate, and then that allows me to go and do talks in schools and to clubs that don't have very big budgets, if any. A lot of the times when I do talks, people just make donations to my How Many Elephants campaign. But the corporate speaking is definitely what pays the bills.
So you would also add artists to your CV then?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And in what mediums?
So I've worked with a material called vegetable ivory, which is an incredible material. It's almost identical in colour and texture to elephant ivory, and it's from the South American rainforests. So when I started on my master's, I didn't people say, what came first, working with the vegetable ivory or the elephants? So I've worked with the vegetable ivory for over a decade. So I was making jewellery for the past decade with this material. It's just an incredible material. It's very versatile. You can dye it. You can do lots of different things with it. And it's from a palm tree. It's a nut from a palm tree. So I went over to Ecuador a couple of years ago and did a self-funded research project where I met the farmers and the artisans who have worked with this material. So 1 in 5 buttons pre-World War One were made from vegetable ivory, but then it got superseded by plastics. So it was a booming industry, but that dropped out when plastic came in. So it was incredibly interesting going out there and sort of, I call it a small nut with a big story. And that's what a lot of my book is about. I've written and done a huge amount of experimentation with this material. So for my elephant campaign, I've made this it's a real showpiece. It's 96 elephants cut in vegetable ivory. And that's how many elephants are poached in a day in Africa at the moment. And this piece, it's won 3 awards so far, this necklace. It's not really a necklace you'd wear as such. It's in a frame. It's more of a piece of art now. And I've had lots of people that want to buy it, but I've actually replicated it in a print, which I've sold many of the prints, but I've kept hold of this necklace because I think one day I'll auction it off, for my campaign. But it's, so that's, I've taken my art into the sort of activism and the conservation space now.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of fun, actually, combining all of those interests. I'm wondering, though, as an artist myself, how did you cut those pieces?
So I've cut them on the laser cutter, which was quite fun, because when I was at university, I got banned from using the laser cutter because each elephant has to be laser cut individually, because each slice of vegetable ivory is only about 3 or 4 centimeters wide. So you can imagine, I was cutting thousands of the elephants and doing all sorts with them, and all sorts of different designs. And in the end, I actually had to go out and buy a small laser cutter just to be able to do my experimentation with the material. But yeah, and then one of the elephants is hand cut in brass, and that represents the per day aspect of the necklace because it's an infographic, and the bullet shells commonly used by the poachers are made from brass. And one elephant in my necklace is facing the other way to say that this crisis can still be turned around and the elephant isn't extinct yet.
Well, a very worthwhile cause, Holly, obviously, and something you clearly are passionate about, so the very best of luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
It's fabulous, and it sounds like it's going to pick up momentum as you go around the world with it.
Yeah, I hope so, because I've never met anyone that doesn't like elephants.
No,
and it's
they are wonderful beasts. Having ridden them myself in the jungle, they are just amazing to connect
incredible.
With. Yeah.
And my exhibition right now, Chris, is meant to be 35,000 elephants on a wall, and that's the annual poaching rate. And it's really powerful to see data visually. So I guess I'm trying to merge scientific data with human connection. And when you stand in a room and look at 35,000 elephant silhouettes, it's just, it's incredibly powerful and very emotional for a lot of people.
For sure. It has an impact, doesn't it, when you visualise it?
It has a huge impact, and I've purposely avoided gruesome images. There's no sort of, I don't want to use mutilated images of mutilated elephants to shock people. I think just the sight of 35,000 elephants on the walls is shocking enough. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I've been doing the last 2 days, is setting up my next exhibition, which is opening in 2 days' time. And I think we're actually going to get about 75,000 elephants in this event space. So it's mind-blowing to stand in this room and see it. So I will be posting to my website more on that if people would like to follow along. It's
okay. Yeah. We'll put a link on our show notes to that, Holly, and also to your social media as well, and follow your stories, because I think if we can connect with you a little bit further down the road and you can give us an update, come back on the show, maybe on our morning show, and tell us how that's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, well, the very, very best of luck with all of it. It's all obviously very, very worthwhile with your conservation campaigns as well. And there's tremendous adventures, a lot of fun, I'm sure. So be careful out there and enjoy it. And thanks for taking the time to come on the programme. It's been fun talking to you.
It's been fun talking to you. Thank you very much.
And there'll be a link in our show notes on our website at wispsports.com, where you can find links to Holly's campaign and her other adventures, as well as the social media links too. You can follow us, of course, on social media at wispsports, and you can also reach us here at info@wispsports.com. We always love to hear from you if you have any comments, questions or suggestions. And if you've already downloaded this podcast to your podcast player, be sure to check out our other shows here at Wisp Sports Radio. We have more than 750 episodes across 30 shows, and our global audience now reaches 1.5 million. So there's something for everyone. And if you'd like to keep up with what's happening in terms of daily news in women's sports, do join us on the Anchor app for our daily morning show, where I'm joined by different co-hosts from a variety of backgrounds in the world of women's sports. I'm Chris Stafford, and until the next time, thank you for listening.
You can count on me.